We're nearing the end of our journey of covering every console generation, and today we're covering the 7th. This generation consisted of the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, and the Nintendo Wii, and they were all undeniably iconic. And if you're not aware, I already covered the 3rd to the 6th generation in other videos, which all those videos you can find in a playlist on my channel. With that being said, this was a really popular generation. Most people have a piece in their heart for one of these three consoles. It doesn't matter if it was playing Wii Sports with your family, Call of Duty on the PlayStation, or Halo on Xbox online with your friends. This was undeniably one of the best console generation ever. Or was it? That all started with the Xbox 360 fully being announced at May 12, 2005 on MTV, because why not? More details on the launch and games coming later that month at E3 2005. Nintendo also showed their newest console at E3, named the Revolution. They didn't say much, but it would be backwards compatible with GameCube games, would get the first ever virtual console, but wouldn't be as powerful as the other consoles. But the Xbox was the earliest to release at November 22nd, 2005, which meant that Microsoft had a huge lead on Sony and Nintendo, and when it launched, it was sold out everywhere for quite a few weeks. At Tokyo Game Show that September, Nintendo showed their revolutionary motion controls, and Sony showed off some game demos, all the while Xbox was slowly catching up to demand. 1 month before E3 2006, Nintendo announced that the Revolution would now go by the name the Nintendo Wii, and at E3 2006, they showed the console working and planned titles to the press. And Sony announced that the release of the PlayStation 3 would be delayed in Europe. Both these consoles released at the end of 2006, except for Europeans who had to wait until March 2007 for the PlayStation 3. By the time these consoles released, Microsoft had already sold 7 million Xbox 360s at that point. Okay, let's start off with the Wii, since that released first in Europe. Fuck you, Americans. The Wii was not your everyday gaming system. The Wii used something called the Blue Ocean Strategy, a marketing strategy that focused on cornering a side of the market that hasn't been targeted before. The Wii was really focused on the casual audience, with the simple to understand motion controls. A lot of people who never played video games wanted a Wii. The controller is just a TV remote with some fancy motion controls technology built in. Easy for even grandma to understand. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, the PlayStation 3. It was backwards compatible with PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games, built-in Wi-Fi, Blu-ray support. This thing could do it all. It was barely not able to fly. It also had something called a CF card. Really hard to develop games for, but when used to its full potential, games looked gorgeous. The problem was, because it was hard to develop for, companies would just develop games for the Xbox 360 first, and then port them over to the PlayStation 3. But it was not like the 360 was having the best time, since after some time, a lot of reports came in of system failures, only displaying these 3 red lights around the power button when trying to boot it up. This was called the infamous Red Ring of Death. Not sure why it's called Red Ring of Death, because it's more of a 3rd, 4th Ring of Death. Anyways, it basically meant that your system was dead. It affected somewhere between the 30 and 50% of all these first model 360s out there. Microsoft's solution? Pretend the issue doesn't exist and let them send in to repair them for free. Sounds familiar? While all these issues were going on, Nintendo was skyrocketing with their Wii, and they were really hard to find for almost 2 full years. By the end of 2006, it had already outsold the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, selling a total of 3.2 million units, and in September 2007, it actually surpassed the 360 in sales. This might have been a runaway success, but the PlayStation 3 and 360 were in a battle of their own, proving which of those two was the better console. The problem was, this battle consisted of a console that didn't work, and a console you'd have to sell a kidney for. So, new models were necessary. So in 2010, Microsoft released the Xbox 360S, an updated model which looked way cleaner, in my opinion, and best of all, it actually worked. And in 2012, Sony released the PlayStation 3 Slim, a way cheaper model of the PlayStation 3. It sadly had to ditch some features like PlayStation 2 backwards compatibility, but that wasn't really necessary anyways. I mean, apparently 155 million people owned a PlayStation 2 anyways. This is the model I own. Not as a kid though, I swear to God, don't show me to her. I think it was back in 2021 I bought it, and I actually played it quite a lot and have quite a few games for it. Oh, also the Wii had a new revision which ditched GameCube backwards compatibility, but you weren't going to buy a Wii for the GameCube compatibility anyways. What I'm trying to say is that all these three versions were the peak of the generation. Yeah, after that, all three companies went a bit overboard on their third version. The PlayStation 3 had this slight thingy that went over the disc. The Wii Mini was absolutely unnecessary, which stripped the Wii of all online connectivity, and the Xbox 360 looked way too much like an Xbox One to be called a 360. I gotta give credit where credit is due. These consoles were really cheap, which made this console generation actually one of the most accessible generations. But before we get to the numbers, we gotta address one big thing, and those are the PlayStation 3 Move controllers and the Xbox 360 Kinect. Obviously, with the Wii being such a success, Microsoft and Sony also wanted some of that pie. So Sony released the PlayStation Move controller, with which you could play certain games with motion controls like the Wii. And Microsoft went absolutely fucking overboard with their Kinect, a camera that could track your body's motion, which meant that there was no controller needed. I never owned a Kinect though, although I do have Dance Central for the 360, which I got from my old middle school. I have tried the Kinect out a couple times at friends' houses, and I can confidently say it doesn't work. Sure, it tracks your motion, but it doesn't feel responsive at all. A lot of times I had to really exaggerate my movement to get the thing to do what I want to do. And Microsoft focused way too much on releasing casual games on this thing. It wasn't a failure, far from it actually. It sold 29 million units, but Microsoft basically stopped putting out non-Kinect games for the rest of the 360's life. Meanwhile, the PlayStation 3 was making a miraculous comeback with games like Beyond Two Souls, Uncharted 3, and mainly The Last of Us. These were huge exclusives that made people pick up a PlayStation 3 basically right before the generation was about to end. And that brings us to the sales numbers. Now we all already know who is number one, so how about we start at the top for once. The Wii absolutely swept this generation with more than 102 million consoles being sold. Now that's far from bad, but I would have expected more. It was sold out for 2 straight years, and I hear so many people talk about how they owned a Wii when they were a kid, that I would have expected it more to sell than the PlayStation 2, but the Wii has left a huge impact on the gaming industry and mostly on Nintendo itself. Because from this generation onward, Nintendo wouldn't focus on power, they would more so focus on different ways to play. Rather than Sony and Microsoft, who just go for the most powerful hardware. And in second place, we have the PlayStation 3 with 87.4 million units sold. The PlayStation 3 was barely able to beat out the 360, which sold 85.7 million units just by releasing The Last of Us right before the PlayStation 4 released. All the while Microsoft was f***ing around with the Kinect, trying to corner a market that the Wii was already dominating. This generation was my favorite generation to cover, and the 8th generation is going to be really exciting when we're going to cover that. So like, subscribe, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.